All right, we're going to be in Psalm 30. We're going to continue tonight, kind of going behind the face covering. And last week I told you Psalm 30 is is kind of a big psalm. When I gave you the background behind it and kind of made the loop back around to a series that we did earlier in the year. And so I said I would try to help us by kind of outlining where we've been. So this is kind of how we start that. The psalm itself is a big psalm. It's a lot bigger than you think it is when we first read it. We're going to read it again in just a second. And I think that sometimes in order to understand the psalm, you've got to kind of drill down and do a deep dive into it, if you will. And so, but when you do, you begin to see some things that emerge. And for me, as I read it, one of the things that came, at least to my mind, especially with the season that we're in and stuff like that, is that there is that whole piece of how God is moving David from places of pain and hurt and struggle and heartache and heartbreak. And then once he kind of gets that mask off and gets away from that, God kind of restores him to some other things. And that's kind of what we're going to look at. It definitely has application to what we're talking about on Sunday morning. It definitely has application to this particular season that we're in. And again, I said this last week, I say it again as a reminder. I was greatly hesitant to do a Sunday morning series on the pandemic, but the pandemic never seemed to go away. And as I told you, I'm one of those guys where I'm one of those guys who basically, just tell me what I need to know so I can get on with life. My life operates a lot better in those things. And so as I shared with you guys last week, I was all about, man, okay, if we need to wear masks and shut down for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, let's just get the 2 weeks over with and just be done with it. But week 3, I'm sitting there going, who lied to me? Somebody lied. Somebody's changing the rules. And a lot of the frustration that, at least for me, through this pandemic is that the rules in the ground keeps changing. And everyone's got their buzzwords and everyone's got their phrases, and of course it's become political and it's become all those things that you wish that it wouldn't, because there's something bigger at stake here. And what's bigger at stake here is all these other things that have to go on in life. I mean, you have to live life. People have to live life. Kids need to be in school. You need to be able to work. People need to be able to work. I mean, there's just so many things that that seem to have crumbled in some ways. And then people have found themselves dealing with the fear, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. We were sharing about that. I mean, people are scared. As Dave's talking about what's going on out at school, I mean, I'd love to say that his school in Osceola County is the only one that's happening in. It's not the case. It is happening everywhere. And it is happening, and people are just, I hate to use the word, but they're kind of corona crazy. And it doesn't go away. You have conversations, but how often in the conversations you're having, at some point in that conversation, does the coronavirus drift into it? I mean, I long for conversations that aren't laced with some type of COVID disclaimer or COVID filter that we have to put it through. Even as we're planning Christmas. I mean, Leanne kind of gave you a sneak peek of something that we're really excited about for Christmas. And I want it to be a walk-through experience. Mm-hmm. But we're designing it to be a drive-through experience. But for heaven's sake, it's August. Common sense says to me, we ought to be able to walk through, it's going to be lit up, it's going to be awesome. The changing world that we live in says to me, don't believe that Christmas time is going to be any better than it is right now, because again, there's somebody out there that's setting the rules for us, and we are trying to be COVID compliant. Churches right now, I mean, I'm grateful for Florida. I'm grateful to live where we live. I'm grateful that we can do what we're doing right now. Because, man, in California, churches are getting pounded right now. And part of my prayer list every day is now dealing with some churches or some people in California in different cities now. I mean, it's different from city to city. While John MacArthur has made the news because he kind of bucked the system and lawyered up because, I mean, he's a mega and could afford to do that. And Greg Laurie did the same thing, and they've opened in different ways, and they're okay. There's a church in Fresno that a court injunction hit them this week with a $3,000 fine for meeting last Sunday morning. And have threatened to do it again if they open next week. And then there's another church, and I believe this is in Ventura, and I could have the cities mixed up, but the court has mandated to them that every staff member of the church and every attendee of the church, if they attend in violation of the social distancing shutdown mandates, will be fined $1,000 and up to a year in jail for every infraction. So last Sunday they did the total of how many thousands that they, as a staff, had been hit with, and then how many people had attended that day, what that bill was. And the church the church bid it and paid that bill. They paid the fine. And they're facing it again this week, and they still haven't determined yet, because they haven't got to court yet, whether or not they're going to be in jail for a year for showing up at church on Sunday. And it all starts over again this week.
Does the Constitution not take...
The Constitution does cover that. So your thinking is, that's not right.
No.
You're right, it's not right. And I think we've kind of hit that phase as we're kind of rattling through these Corona days, where that sense of something's not right is beginning to emerge in people, and even as followers, we are beginning to kind of struggle against, okay, where do we need to go on this? How do we need to land? The struggle is real. The virus is real. You know, I have someone that just tore into me via email this week, and they said, I've been listening to you preaching, from the way that you're joking about things, you don't think the virus is real. And I wrote him back and I said, no, you're wrong. I think the virus is very, very real. But the virus isn't what scares me. What scares me is how afraid you are of the virus. I haven't heard back yet. I'm sure I will. That's just the world we live in. I mean, that's what we're facing these days. And so there is a great deal of hurt. There's a great deal of angst. There's a great deal of longing that people have for things to get back to something that they could feel like is normal. And sadly, you know, we're trying to get back to something that will feel like is normal, because it's not going to be the same normal yet. The bounce back is not what used to be. And so we have to navigate that. And then the call of Christ on top of that. I mean, you got goofballs like me telling you, oh, you can make a dent. I mean, because the call of Christ then for us is, as followers, we have to be the voices of reason and sanity in a world that's crazy. And how do you do that? And then not only is it hard to do, but it's even more complicated, because in our quiet, dark moments of our lives and hearts, we have those moments, those isolated moments of our own craziness, where it gets to us for a minute. You've had them, I've had them, you know, where you want to go out and howl at the moon or something. I mean, you just can't seem to kind of get a grip on it. And you're just like, my gosh, if I hear one more, and you kind of fight through that, and you push through it, and you have to. And I think God understands that. But that's kind of where we're at. And so as we kind of look at this, I mean, we end up, I think we find ourselves again in the Psalm. And so the Psalms is not a bad place to go. I know for me, I know the challenge is to reboot every morning. For me, something that has been incredibly helpful and kind of amusing at the same time, there is a book that has been written for kids. And it is, I'm going to say this, and immediately, you know, it will not be so. There will be something wrong with it. But it is the best book for children I have ever read about getting them to know a level of intimacy with Christ. It is called Notes from Jesus. And what it is a series of notes that you read every day with your kid that is basically Jesus writing a note to his buddy, his best friend. And it's your kids. And it's got a Bible verse, and then it's got the takeaway is, and how can you get to know me better? And so it's Jesus talking to your child. And so we read it every night. We read one a night, and we read the verse each night, and then take that moment. So how can we get to know Jesus better? And this is what he says, you know. And it's put out by Lifetree, which is done by Group, and I highly recommend the book. It actually is a really good book for some adults, I will tell you. And so what I've been doing is, since I read that at Caden at night, that's my reboot in the morning. That's my first thought of the day. What was it we were talking about last night, Jesus? What were we saying? Because today I want to get to know you better in this way. And that's where I've been starting. And so it's kind of been a cool, kind of full circle thing where all of a sudden the devotions that we're doing at night with my child is the one that we start, for me, the next day with God and I. And it helps. I mean, I realize when you make that kind of call, especially if you're not a morning person, that's a tough reboot. But by the same token, we are living in unusual days, and sometimes in unusual days we need to try unusual methods, and those unusual methods can be helpful. And so hopefully you're finding that helpful, and hopefully you don't feel like, my gosh, I hear about the pandemic all week and then we talk about it at church. Hopefully what you're hearing here is helpful and hopeful. One of the things that has emerged in the midst of this, we haven't found the venue yet, and I keep thinking maybe we won't need it. But the suggestion has been made that wouldn't it be great if we could get as many church folks that wanted to get together and just give them the opportunity to be in a safe environment, just to vent and share their thoughts, or just say, this is just driving me nuts about this. And create that environment to do that, which is almost a, almost like a coronavirus anonymous meeting, but and after you say it, we say we love you, Gail, and just say just kind of go on with your day. But I'm not sure we'll get there. We're thinking about it, praying through it. Don't know what that venue looks like. Don't know who the heck will facilitate that. Probably we'll let Leanne do it, and I'll take the day off. Anyway, let's go to Psalm 30, and somebody read through that out loud for us if you wouldn't mind. It's not bad. It's only about a dozen verses, and read it, and we'll kind of jump into it and see what we can accomplish over the next few minutes.
I will exalt you, O Lord, for you lifted me out of the depths and did not let my enemies gloat over me. O Lord my God, I called to you for help, and you healed me. O Lord, you brought me up from the grave and spared me from going down into the pit. Sing to the Lord, you saints of his, praise his holy name. For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may remain for a night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. I'm not sure. When I felt secure, I said, I will never be shaken. O Lord, when you favored me, you made my mountain stand firm. But when you hid your face, I was dismayed. To you, O Lord, I called. To you, the Lord, I cried for mercy. What gain is there in my destruction, in my going down into the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it proclaim your faithfulness? Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my help. You turned my wailing into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, that my heart may sing to you and may not be silent. O Lord, my God, I will give you thanks forever.
Thank you. Alan Golding was a missionary in the Philippines, and he and his wife were visiting a small town in the area that they were there. And they visited a well-known school where silversmiths were trained to produce items, trinkets, exquisite works. And Alan had purchased a small memento from the shop. It was a money clip, pure silver, very distinctive in design. And after carrying and using the money clip for nearly 24 years, the clasp on it broke off, the clip on it broke off. And when he had the opportunity, he went back to that same silver school to see if someone there could fix it. When he went in, he walked in and he showed the guy the thing, and the man that he gave it to was about his age. And he examined it and looked at it, and he said, well, you know what? I designed this clip. He goes, I was the only one ever to make this design. I made all of these that were ever made. And so Alan asked him, he said, well, can you fix it? And I said, well, of course, I designed it. I can fix it. And there's something profoundly spiritual about that encounter, because that's what happens in the psalm. David, the king of Israel, is broken and needs help. And so instead of going to the wrong place for help, he goes to the one place where he can go to be fixed. Meaning, he goes back to his creator, the one who created him, the one who designed him, because that's who can fix him. And I want you to understand that when we think about removing the face covering, one of the things that's going on in the midst of this that deals with the hurt and heartache that people feel, and you can define that any way you want, that's behind the mask as we deal with all this. The reality is that when we take the mask off and we take it to God, that's where we find healing and hope. In other words, we need to go to our Creator to fix what's wrong with us, and any place else doesn't work. During the pandemic, one of the frustrations that I have had is the same that you've had, is we keep waiting, and I talked about this a minute ago, we wait for someone to give us an answer. We're looking for a fix to what's wrong with us by waiting for a doctor somewhere to say something, or a politician to make a rule, or a governor to make a mandate, or a school administrator to make a statement that will kind of fix things. We're wanting a fix from sources that probably can't fix what really is going on with us. And what's really going on with us is that we're in angst and we're just ticked off about what's going on, and we don't like it, and we don't understand it. We need some clarity on it. Because good news, bad news, I mean, while we feel that what we're going through is unsustainable, and in some ways it is, but at the end of the day, you're still here, I'm still here, we're making it, we're figuring it out. We're the ones that are blessed and fortunate because everyone hasn't figured it out. And there are some people that are really struggling at a level that you are not because you're here. And that's one of the ripple effect struggles that people will deal with in the aftermath of it. Even with the churches that are battling, we talked about a minute ago in California. One of the things that is now emerging, and people are finding this out pretty quick, is that while churches are struggling to reopen, and some will not reopen until next year, and people are trying to process and deal with that, there's a spiritual element of that, where people are now finding out that while online ministries work and online viewing is good and online is a great resource, but we all know down deep inside that that's not how we were created. We were created for community, and we were supposed to meet together in person. And so what we're doing is we're using a placebo to kind of give us a fix for what we need in the moment, but we know that there's something bigger. There's a need to connect that goes beyond that, and this is unsustainable, and it is. And so churches as ministries are trying to deal with that as well. And so for us in the psalm, David kind of starts pulling this out. And if you look at the psalm, it is a profoundly moving psalm, and there's a theme that runs through it, that there's a healing that needs to take place, that something is wrong. We know the story about David bringing the ark to Jerusalem, but we don't know a lot about the other issues and challenges that the king of Israel is facing at this time. But in verses 8 through 9, we read what I think is David's prayer to move from hurting to healing. It says this: "To you, O Lord, I cried, to the Lord I cried for mercy. What gain is there in my destruction in going down into the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it proclaim your faithfulness?" And so David does a couple of things in here. And the first thing that happens is that there's a prayer, a distinct prayer for healing that he offers. Okay? And as you just heard, what's going on in verses 8 and 9 is there's a little bit of an argument with God. Let me give it to you in contemporary language. Lord, allow me to plead my case for you just for a moment. Why do you keep me evil? Why do you keep me ill? Why must I hover near death? What possibly good can I do for you if I'm dead? If I'm sick and I'm dead and I can't do what I'm created to do, what good is that to you? I can worship you better if you would improve my state of life, Heavenly Father. That's a paraphrase of what he's praying there. And now I'll give, in fairness to David, his argument isn't totally self-serving. He's sincere, calculated, but sincere. And he's saying, God, if you'll save me, you'll have one more worshiper in this world to bring you glory and honor. And isn't that a good thing? And we kind of smile at that, but we often approach God with the same agenda. Don't you want to bless me, Lord, so I can serve you better? Now, we may not have prayed that out loud, but I know I've thought it. I'm sure you have too. Somewhere in that gray matter, as you're thinking through the things of God, we thought to ourselves, God, if you would just, God, what a great idea, God, if you could just bless me more, I could serve you better. I could give at a higher level. I could bless others at a higher level. I could be a high-octane blesser of others if you would just bless me a little bit more, God. And it's a perfectly great plan to us, but we don't feel too guilty about it because it's good for God too. It's a win-win. And we like to have a win-win with God. And so that's kind of what David's doing here. He's like, what good is it going to be if I go down to the pit? What good is it going to do if I'm getting beat up and trampled here, I mean, come on, God. I can do so much more for you. When I'm walking tall and walking proud and you're energizing me and you kind of carry me through life. And so David is coming before God with a very honest prayer, needing help. And then if you kind of get past that and drop down to verse 10, David realizes that maybe his negotiating isn't going real well. And he comes back around in verse 10 and says, "Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O God, be my help." Basically, he gets to the end of this thing and he says, Lord, have mercy on me. Help me out. There's no more bargaining. There's no more, here's what I can do for you if you'll just do this for me. And we all end up there at some point. We all end up at that moment where we recognize that God is the one that has to bring us through this. And I said it before, and I'm going to say it to you again. For us as followers, he is the source that when we kind of take off the mask, that we can move from this hurt and heartache period that we're going through and discover the healing that we need. In other words, you don't have to make deals with God. God hasn't asked you to. He hasn't invited you to do that. And so it's not necessary. And so when you're praying, take out of your prayer life negotiating with God, because it tends to get you in an unhealthy place and it really doesn't accomplish what you want it to accomplish. God has said, let's keep it simple. You just ask me, tell me what you want. And I'm going to hear that prayer. But God knows what we need. And because God knows what we need, he's going to give us the thing that he wants us to have. And it may or may not line up with what we want. Someone sent me a thing and said, through the pandemic, I've learned this. I need to lose weight, but what I want is banana pudding. Something deeply profound about that, and there's a great deal of truth in that. Yes, I need to lose weight, but I want banana pudding. I need to lose weight, but I'll take Bluebell instead. I mean, the needs and wants in our lives don't always line up. But when it comes to asking God for what's going on, just tell him what you need, and trust that he'll get you the rest of the way and fill in the gaps if you don't get it quite right. David has to move from negotiating with God. God, if you just let this in today, I'll do this. God, if you just wrap this up today, I'll do this. Nope. Just tell him what's going on. Let him be the one that moves you from that hurt to healing. Also then, we also see, though, that there is also in this psalm a praise for healing. Go back to verse 1. It says this, "I will exalt you, O Lord, for you lifted me out of the depths, and you did not let my enemies gloat over me." And so the phrase there, lifted up, comes from a Hebrew phrase, if you will, that draws the word picture of a bucket in a well. So when David says, you're lifting me up, it's like dipping a well down into the water and then drawing that water out. If you've ever done that with an old style well where you've actually lowered that bucket, filled it, and pulled it back up. I mean, there's something about that that is an interesting kind of feeling if you've never done that. It's hard to describe. When I've done it, because you send that bucket down empty. But all of a sudden when you're pulling that bucket up, it's now a bucket full of water. So it don't come up as easy as it went down. But yet you're doing the work because you know what's in the bucket is what you need, and so you do the work because this is the answer to what happened when you dip that bucket in. And that's the word picture that's being drawn here, of kind of drawing up out of the well. So you reach down into the darkest depths, he says, and God, you kind of pulled me out of the grave. I was almost gone. In essence, he is saying, God, I lift you up because you know what? You lifted me up. I'm just gonna praise who you are, and I'm gonna say how great you are because you proved it. You did your work in me. And so David is also not just praying for healing, there's a praise for healing. Because this is what happens to all of us when we've had that brush with mortality, when we've had that brush with death. And so that's why the psalm itself, we don't really know what's going on. We don't know all that's happened for David at this point when he's writing this. But there's something in his background that's happened where maybe he has been sick, maybe this comes in the aftermath of someone trying to kill him. It's hard to know, but there's a desperation there, and he's needing God to do a healing work in his life. Again, for us, we're kind of moving through a season right now where we're tired of the mask living, we're tired of the social distancing, we long for something more. Some people are actually dealing with sickness. I mean, they are. They're physically sick. The virus has caught them. And so they're dealing with that too. So again, there's a healing that needs to take place. But David also is smart enough to know that you praise God for what he's done. This is the joy that you feel after God has kind of stepped in and shown up. We've all been there. We've all prayed something. And we prayed with the intention that, God, if you would just do this thing for me, this one thing, I'll never ask for anything else. And God laughs and goes, ha, 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 you lie. And that's okay. He knows us. It's okay. We can say whatever we want to God. He can handle it. But God understands our hearts. But we know that when he comes through in that miraculous way too, we're just like, wow. And for a while, we're very much on track. I mean, we are focused. We are laser focused. We are going to, we're going to do whatever God says whenever he says it. We're going to jump high. We're going to run far. We're just going to do it all. And then somehow we lose the intensity. And we kind of lose our focus. And it doesn't last. But a joyful, thankful perspective and keeping that is essential to a joyful, positive life. And so for David, he is thanking God for what God has done to bring him through. And he is trying his best to make sure that he doesn't lose focus of that. Because that perspective changes your life. I've asked you the question on Sunday morning. I'll ask you on Wednesday night. I'm praying about it. I'm sure you are as well. But the question is, how will we be different when we get to the end of this? Because I know we will be. And I really do believe with all my heart, as I've been saying, it's not just words. I believe when we come through it, we're going to come through it better than we've ever been. I believe that we will be stronger. We will be better versions of ourselves. My prayer every day has been, God, help me lead wisely through this and help me lead strong through this. Because when the regulator comes off, and there will be a day it does come off, I want to hit the ground running. I want the tires to be spinning. I want the pedal to the metal. I want to be moving. I don't want to be the guy that's got to take 6 months in to recover from whatever it is we went through. I want to be done and moving forward. I just really think that brings glory to God. I think the hunker down approach is so anti-spiritual that if we're not careful, what we're doing in a physical sense can roll over and roll on top of us if we're not careful spiritually. And that scares me. That's the spiritual dynamic of what we're going through. And so David reminds us we're going to be joyful. We have to begin our day as we're doing now for being excited that when you wake up in the morning, he's kept you alive for one more night to give you one more day. Whatever that holds. Whether it's walking into a school setting where you've got to deal with parents that are pulling their hair out, whether you're dealing with kids that are terrified and scared, whether you're dealing with a workplace where you're not even sure who's going to come to work anymore, and you're not even sure how you're going to make it. But God gave you today. What are you going to do with it? And it's not easy. And for followers, it's not easy because you know what you're supposed to do. But what you're supposed to do is not what you always feel like doing. Because what you want to do is what everybody else does. But that spiritual side of you compels you to be more. It compels you to be different. It compels you to be the voice of reason, that voice of encouragement, that person that's going to bless in the midst of whatever's going on. And by doing that, you really do set yourself apart, and people will start holding on to you. Not literally, maybe they will, but they're gravitating toward you because they need to get caught in that wake that you're leaving behind because you're doing something that they can't do. It's funny. I got to go into a place where I walked into a place this week where I get to navigate it in a different way every once in a while. But as I walked on, I mean, I had person after person who's come up to me. They're teachers. Saying, man, it's just so good to see you, and then asking me questions about what's going on in the world right now. As I'm trying to make my way to get to a meeting. But the questions are all about these coronavirus conversations. How are you facing? How are you doing it? And then somebody walked up and said, I've been watching you online. Holy mackerel. It has been my lifeline through this thing. And I'm like, well, great. Well, why don't you come in person? Well, no, I can't do that. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. But, okay, we'll keep watching. It's out there. And so, but we have to get to that point, too, where we understand that we need to thank God for what he's done. And the fact that you're here for one more day, we're still living behind the mask, but there's hope at the other end of this thing, and God's going to get us there. Just like he got David there in the Psalm, he's going to get us there, and we have to keep pressing on. But also, there's another piece of this. There's a purpose for the healing as well. In other words, it's a reoccurring theme. God's doing this, and he's allowing something to happen within you during this time for a reason, so when you emerge, you'll be stronger. There's a purpose in this healing process that God takes us through. In verse 4, David says this, sing praise to the Lord, you saints of his, praise his holy name. In other words, your healing has a purpose. We don't always get far enough along in our walk with Christ to see the purpose in all that he does. Let's be honest. You've got a list and I've got a list of stuff that has happened. You trust and believe that God has a purpose in it, but doggone it, you don't know what that purpose is yet. God, why'd you do it this way? Why'd you do it with this timing? Why'd you do it with this result? And it's I'm going to trust you. I'm going to hold on, but I don't get it. I've had those moments. And some of you have heard me tell that story. I had those moments with a sick kid when she was little. I said things to God that I would blush if you ever heard me say them out loud today. And I had to kind of break to that point where, and again, God was good. He kept sending people into my world that I needed, that had the arena to speak truth into somebody that was broken and rebellious. And I don't know if I was more broken or rebellious. But I had a kid and I thought she was going to die and I was ticked at God. It's the whole story right there. That was it. That was it. And I couldn't get it. I couldn't figure it out. My common sense wouldn't make it work. My depth of spirituality could not help me find the answers that I needed. So I was hacked off. And I did not hesitate to tell God about how hacked I was. But God knew, and he sent some people into my world at the right time that was able to kind of talk me out of my tree just a little bit and talk some common sense and say some hard things to me that got me to the point where I was able to pray, okay, God, I believe you're God. 2 + 2 = 4. You're God. You created it. I don't doubt any of that. But I don't get it. And so it was an honest, real prayer. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep following. I'm not going to be one of those guys that wanders off and renounces my faith and drifts out and, becomes a traveling evangelist with a spangly coat. I'm going to be where you want me to be, but you need to let me get to know you. Because if I never get a chance to see the purpose, I just have to get to know you well enough to know that there's one there. And I didn't know him that well. Stunk to be the church that hired me because that was a staff member that was praying at it. I didn't know him that well. And you know what? God has honored that prayer. You would not be here today had he not honored that prayer. My desire for an intimacy with God radically changed because I was looking for a purpose in the pain. I was looking for a purpose in what was going on, and I couldn't get all the answers. And I don't have the answers, by the way. I still don't have them. But I do know there was a purpose to it. And that God has a bigger plan. He always has. But coming out from behind that has allowed me then to be able to be so much more and to relate to people and have a heart for people and have mercy for people because I have no mercy gifts and be able to do things that I never could have done had I not gotten down that road with God. That's what David's done here. That's what you have to do. And so for us to get beyond this pandemic, we've got to go behind that face covering and we've got to allow God to meet us here at this point of need here to bring us to this point. Now that's the first thing that's in the psalm. Now there's more. There's enough to carry us through a few weeks here. But we got to be done because we're out of time and you got to pick up your children and we have to go home because we have school tomorrow. Let me just pray and then we'll pick up from there, okay? God, you are good and we're thankful for that goodness. I thank you for the folks that are with us online. I thank you for the folks that are here in the room. I thank you for their lives. I thank you for the calling that you have placed in their lives. God, help us to be the people we're supposed to be in a very difficult time, but also a time where you're working in the midst of it. Give us enough of a glimpse to keep us moving forward. And give us enough faith to hold on to you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.